Series. My name is Clenita Graffenreid. I work at the UW Smart Center, and we are pleased to bring to you the last installment of our 2024 Speaker Series. Again, it's hosted by MHTTC, Northwest MHTTC, and co-sponsored by the UW Smart Center. I hope that you've have been with us since we kicked off in October. Our theme for the series is promoting a positive school climate for student mental health, effective data systems, and practices. So glad you are here. So thank you, Dr. McDaniel. So we always like to start off our sessions with a land acknowledgement. The UW Smart Center and Northwest MHTTC acknowledge that we live, learn, and work on the ancestral lands of the Coast Salish people who walked here before us and those who still walk here. We are grateful to aim to respectfully live and work on these lands with the Coast Salish and Native people who call this home. Like I mentioned earlier, our 2024 Speaker Series is brought to you by the Northwest MHTTC and the University of Washington Smart Center. And if you are just coming to join us for the first time, no worries. You can go and watch the previous 1, 2, 3, 4. No, we actually had five previous series, 5 previous sessions. They are all found, and we'll tell you where you can find them on our website. You can listen to them, and because we have recorded them. So if you have someone that you want to share this information with, this session 2 will be recorded and put on our website. So the National MHTTC Network, goals of the network are to accelerate the adoption and implementation of evidence-based practices, to heighten the awareness and knowledge and skills of the workforce, to foster regional national alliances, and to ensure availability and delivery of publicly available free of charge training and technical assistance. The Northwest MHTT supports Idaho, Oregon, Washington, and the state of Alaska. The UW Smart Center. We are a national leader in developing and supporting the implementation of evidence-based practices, EBPs, in schools, including prevention, early intervention, and intensive supports. And with no further ado, we are here to conclude our speaker series with the wonderful, the talented, and just a beautiful soul, Dr. Sarah McDaniels. And I'm going to read you her bio. Dr. McDaniels is a professor of special education in the Department of Special Ed and Multiple Abilities at the University of Alabama, and is the director of the Center for Interconnected Behavioral and Mental Health Systems, CIBMHS. The CIBMHS is a research center that engages in rigorous research in schools and focuses on supporting schools and districts in implementing positive behavioral interventions and supports and school-based mental health services. Dr. McDaniel conducts research and teaches in the areas of PBIS, classroom management, assessment and coaching, Tier 2, social, emotional, and behavior supports, and preventative treatments for diverse populations of students placed at risk. And I'm pleased to let you guys know, and I'm going to ask Dr. McDaniels to tell us a little bit more about it. She is an author and just recently published a new book on Tier 2 supports. Dr. McDaniels, please share with our audience about your new book.
I sure will. Thank you for that introduction. Hi, everybody, wherever you are. It's good to see you today. I'm so glad you're here, and I know that everybody's time is precious, so I just feel honored that you took time out of your day and chose to spend it this way. So thank you so much. Thank you to Clenita. All of the love right back to you. Clenita just mentioned our book. So it's a book about a systematic framework for Tier 2 that helps you to identify students who are in need of targeted support, and then which areas of need they have across social, emotional, hyperactivity, inattention, conduct, and the strength area, and then matching interventions to those needs and using progress monitoring to make data-based adaptations and individualization. So you can find it on Amazon. That's the easiest way I know how to tell you to find it. If you just put my name in Amazon and Tier 2 book or something, it'll come up. If it doesn't, I can help you. And I'm here today to talk about bullying prevention. And like on the surface, that seems like it's not related at all. But actually, all of the work that we all do in our work is all tangled or braided together, however you want to look at it. So bullying prevention is a serious topic, and I am here today to build on what my good friend Rhonda taught you all last time. She talked about interventions and procedures that we can teach students for preventing and responding to bullying. And I'm going to focus today more about what we can do with the adults and how we can get all adults on board. So I'm really excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this. I feel like Clanita asked me like a year ago. So I've been looking forward to this for a year. So here we are. Let me get started. We'll talk about adults, like I just said. If you have any questions, though, about kids, go ahead and put it in the chat. I can answer those too. A little bit about me. I used to always say I'm a mom, I'm a professor, but those are actually just my roles. So who I am is a person who's very passionate about education and students and families and educators and taking good care of our educators so that they can help our students best. And I'm also a person who loves the outdoors. And in my roles, I am a mom of 3 and a professor and wife and friend and all the things. So we were talking before the session started that it's good to humanize ourselves and show everybody that we're all just humans and all doing the best we can. So that's a little bit about me. I did start off in education in a kind of odd way. I went to Elon University on a soccer scholarship. And if anybody's a teacher in the house, you may be able to relate to this, but I could see my freshman and sophomore years, I could see the education majors. They were mostly females. And they seemed to have needed a car. And I remember they always had like poster board and crayons and markers and all these things that cost money that I didn't have. I didn't have a car in college, and I had to keep jobs just to keep up with my just general costs. So I didn't have the extra money to be an education major. And so I majored in psychology. And then I got a job in Atlanta afterwards. I started out as a paraprofessional. I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go with psychology and education. And someone told me that if you wanted to make the most impact with students, to be a classroom teacher, because that's who gets to spend the most time with students. And that made a lot of sense as soon as I went in for a visit. And then the next day they asked me to be a paraprofessional, and I haven't left education since. So I started out at a school for students with severe EBD. That's what they label it in Georgia, in a self-contained school. And I did 6 years of teaching there. So that's what informs my approach and my lens. I also studied juvenile justice in my doctoral training program. So I'm very familiar with the pipeline and what's at the end of the pipeline. And a lot of my career has been dedicated to moving up the pipeline and figuring out what we can do to prevent bad outcomes, harm for kids, and even treat students way before we get to self-contained settings and juvenile detention centers. So that's where I kind of found my spot. It was really intense and difficult to do research around juvenile detention because those patterns of behavior and the decks are really stacked against students and youth at that age and that level. So I find it much more refreshing and easier actually to work around preventative systems, and especially around tier 2 is kind of my jam. So I'll talk to you today about prevention of bullying. We're going to talk a lot though about what happens when there are incidents of bullying. So hopefully it all kind of comes together. And I thought we could go all the way back to the basics. One thing that's really common when we go out and support schools, we talk about PBIS, we talk about bullying prevention, suicide prevention. And one thing when it comes to bullying is educators, families, and students do not have a common language around bullying and what bullying is. So sometimes we hear things being called bullying that are not bullying. They're way over generalizing that term. And then some incidents are bullying, but they're not being considered so. So why is it important to look at bullying? You all wouldn't be here unless you didn't understand that bullying is a pretty serious issue. It's been around for a long time, so it's not one of these things like smartphones that's brand new. However, things like smartphones, social media have definitely intensified specific types of bullying. So having bullying in the school environment and even at home or in the community when students experience bullying there increases absenteeism and decreases learning. So bullying is pretty common and impacting 1 in 5 students in K-12 education. So we'll get clear first. It's Brene Brown who says clear is kind, right? So we'll be really careful about our language. And I encourage you all when you work with adults in school buildings and even families and students as well, I'm sure Rhonda mentioned this, to be very clear and nuanced in your discussion around bullying, what it is, what it isn't, what types. And we'll go over that a little bit today. There's a lot more that we could talk about. So this is more just an overview. So bullying, technical bullying, is repeated aggression, harassment, threats, or intimidation when one person has greater status or power. So there's a lot of components on the left, and let's just break those up because when somebody's saying, and even my kids say it too, he's bullying me. Well, the first thing we have to look at is whether it's repeated. So if it was one incident, one comment, that's not bullying because it has to be repeated. The other really interesting part to me to think through all the different possibilities in school settings and even in the community and online is when one person has greater status or greater power, and that can be perceived status or perceived power. It doesn't have to be real. So there's 2 8-year-olds. To us, there isn't a more powerful 8-year-old than the other 8-year-old, but to them in their social structure, there can be more perceived power. There can be an imbalance there for sure. So that's bullying. We also talk about where the behavior of a student creates a hostile environment for another student. And it is important to know there are laws around bullying. There are laws around bullying prevention and training. The school is obliged to problem solve and engage in immediate and substantive efforts to protect the at-risk student, so the victim of bullying. So it's not something that we can just look past, hope it goes away, not have time to deal with. I was working with a middle school recently and I was asking them to change some of their practices and they said, really all we can do is crowd control at this point. We can't do anything else. And that's just, it can't be an acceptable answer. So we have to take bullying seriously and make sure that we have our procedures, all of our reporting and all of that in place, and that we're really making immediate and substantive efforts to work to address it. Okay, so let's then talk about what is not bullying. So we talked about what is bullying, repeated aggression, harassment. There's a power imbalance there somehow. So things that we hear often that children especially overgeneralize, and sometimes parents, caregivers as well, right? They can even use the language of that's bullying, that kid's bullying my child or on the baseball field or wherever. So general teasing is unkind and unwanted, but not necessarily bullying. Unkind remark, not bullying. An argument between 2 peers, not necessarily bullying, especially if they're around the same place in the social structure and nobody's kind of got power over somebody else. And a fight in the hallway would be more like an aggressive incident, not necessarily bullying. You would have to dig a little bit deeper into the details about what's going on for any of that to be considered bullying. But a lot of times when we just hear, we hear parents talk about an incident or children talk about an incident, they'll label it as bullying, but it's not. So because we have to respond to bullying in a certain way, we do want to make sure that we're using really correct terminology and sorting through and kind of, okay, this is bullying, we need to address it this way, and then this is not bullying. Here's how we're going to address an unkind statement or aggressive incident. We'll address those differently. But in the cases that are truly bullying, we need to have those serious responses that are planned out. So let's talk about types of bullying. This is information to share. I'm going to show you how you can get everyone in your school building on board. We trained an entire district of every single person in the building, including bus drivers and SROs, on bullying prevention It was a small rural district, so everyone was in one auditorium, but I think the whole district was like 5 schools, but everybody was there. And one of the things we spent a lot of time on is teaching these definitions, because even adults, they don't understand the different types of bullying, or there's an incident occurred and they don't realize that incident that happened is a type of bullying. They just think it's, one kid shoving another kid. So physical bullying. A lot of adults have kind of a stereotyped idea of what bullying is, and so they don't see these other types as bullying. So to get everyone in your staff involved, the first thing you will need to do is define bullying and not bullying, and then the types of bullying. So the first one we'll talk about is physical bullying. This is the very stereotypical, what's that movie where the kid sticks his tongue on the hole and it gets stuck? So the bully in the alley. So children who are kind of physically bigger or even smaller, picking on a larger child. But it is the most obvious form of bullying. It's also, for some of us, the most stereotypical, the one that you would think of the most. And in this one, someone is trying to gain control or maintain control over somebody else with this physical interaction. So that could be kicking, hitting, punching, slapping, shoving, other physical attacks. This is the easiest to identify type of bullying because you will see a dust up of an incident, usually. There are some students who would kind of walk by, slap somebody on the back of the head, keep on walking, and it's not as noticeable. But out of all the types of bullying, this one is really obvious, especially in schools. This one has historically received a lot of attention around bullying efforts in schools. So it's an important one to talk about. It's also important to understand and kind of think through how sometimes we might be elevating this type of bullying and then kind of looking past other types. So the next one is verbal bullying. Again, it's got to be repeated. There's got to be a power imbalance here, but it's where we're using words and statements instead of physical hitting, kicking, that sort of thing. But the purpose is the same: to belittle, to demean, to hurt another person. A lot of times verbal bullying is around the way somebody acts. Victims of bullying are a lot of times anyone with a difference who has been othered in their community or in their school. And then common verbal bullies to target kids are anybody with special needs, anybody who's different in any way. Verbal bullying is very difficult to identify, especially as kids get older. They get sneakier and they may be whispering, they may be making sure nobody's around when they're saying these sorts of things. They may know that there's a video camera on the bus, but they're just going to say it just at a low enough level that nobody will hear it. So a lot of times children are taught to just ignore words. And a lot of times this type of bullying can get ignored because they're like, oh, they didn't mean it. That was just somebody's words. Ignore their words. But actually, we want to take verbal bullying just as seriously because the harm that it can do is just as dangerous as physical bullying and the other types of bullying. Okay. Next is relational bullying. So this one is very stereotypically kind of female girls. And what's going on here is like adolescent girls, usually girls, where this is not a really noticed type of bullying. It can be kind of sneaky. And what girls are trying to do when they engage in this type of behavior is they get a group together to get one girl separated from that group or isolate that individual. So we call it relational aggressive or relational bullying because there's a relationship that exists and we're trying to separate or isolate or ostracize one individual. So this one is very common around 5th to 8th grade. It can be in boys, but it's more likely to be in girls. In those ages, you'll see more boys engaging in physical and verbal bullying. This is the kind of mean girl or frenemy stereotype. And a lot of this is actually modeled for girls in social media and YouTube and even in TV shows. I have a 10-year-old girl, and sometimes we have to turn off the TV shows because it is modeling relational bullying. It is modeling things that we wouldn't want to be teaching our students. So girls can pick up on these behaviors in lots of different places. And this is kind of how they work out their power imbalances and manipulate and demean others. This is the one that nobody that I know of has quite cracked yet. And it has a lot of potential for causing a lot of harm. This is something that when I first started teaching, we didn't have to worry about. But more and more, this online cyber social media bullying is a really big issue. And there's lots of different types here. So if we'll just focus on kind of online, that can include emails and texts. It can include sharing images that are then shared to an entire group or even made a meme out of. And this is a type where you're using technology instead of fists or kicking somebody or hateful words. You're using technology to embarrass, to demean, to minimize another individual. So we lump that all together in this cyberbullying context. This one's really hard because a lot of things can happen in the cyber world outside of school that then get brought into the school and then we're having to deal with then at the school. We've talked to lots of districts about, if an incident occurred out of school at 10 o'clock at night on a phone, but now it's caused an issue at the school. Is it the school's problem to deal with? Who handles these issues? Can be a really big question. But because the technology doesn't just exist on the phone, those are real incidents that then happen to people that then come to school the next day together. Or even worse, you've got somebody cyberbullying an individual who is all by themselves and there aren't any parents or caregivers kind of plugged in, looking and monitoring and noticing these things. So it can feel really, really isolating or really scary. So this one is really difficult to deal with. It's difficult to find. However, there is usually some sort of track record, screenshots of this. So where verbal bullying, you can usually not hear it. Somebody just has to report it to you. Sometimes students do save these and report these. So in this area, it would be really, really good to help students understand how to report what they see online. A lot of times these are incidents that happen in group text, and it really just takes one brave student in that group text to be able to report that to an adult. Sometimes it's happening on social media. People are seeing the comments that are being made, and we really need to teach our students how to be brave and then how also to report it. There's another category that's specific to and can be related to cyber, but that is for sexual bullying. And it's anytime the topic of the bullying, the harm, the humiliation is related to sexual name calling, crude comments, vulgar gestures, uninvited touching, propositioning, and any pornographic materials. So when the bullying is specific to sexual activity and those topics, it can be in its own category. And this one can cross over, I'll go back one, it can cross over into cyberbullying as well, because now we have individuals who are doing extortion things where they're asking children to send pictures and then telling everybody they're going to share them with everybody. So it crosses over both of those different categories, which is incredibly scary. But it's good to teach everybody that that it doesn't have to be sexual abuse, that there are all these behaviors that can be considered sexual bullying and are not okay. We have another category around prejudicial bullying, and this one can actually be harassment as well. So these are bullying behaviors that are based on differences, especially around race, religion, sexual orientation. So in the real world, and we teach this to our students, hate crimes are a real thing, hate speech is a real thing. And when you do that in school, it's also a very real thing. And it's this type of bullying. And so a lot of times, two things are happening in this area, which is we already talked about. Any student who kind of feels othered or feels different is a target for bullying, to be a bully victim. And then you have this added layer where the bullying is targeting that racial difference, sexual orientation difference, religious difference, and so on. So then those are our main types of bullying. Then we talk about different roles that students can have. So if you were presenting this to your entire staff in an overview in the new school year, and you wanted to start a new bullying prevention campaign overview, you would start with what is bullying, what is not bullying, and then you would go into those different types of bullying to make sure that everybody's looking for all types of bullying and not just verbal bullying, or that we do need to work a little bit differently around online bullying. The next thing, the third step that they would need to know are the roles of students in bullying. So there's not just the bully that we pay attention to. There's lots of different people that can be involved here in different roles. So there's definitely the bully. There's the person or individual that is the victim, and sometimes the victims of bullying then become a victim bully. So this kind of is where we pass down these behaviors. If a child is bullied in the neighborhood, they might go to school and bully somebody smaller than them or younger than them, or seen as different in some way. And then we have group bullies. This happens a lot with adolescents, especially with boys, and then the girls that we talked about, where they'll build these kind of groups around a bully leader, and everybody kind of defends that individual, and everybody wants in the group, because that way they're not going to be the victim of the bullying because they're in the bully group. So there's kind of the bully, there's the victim that becomes the bully, then there's these group bullies. And then we also have to be careful to also tend to our witnesses and our bystanders, and kind of understand the risk that they take in being a witness and a bystander, and how we can recognize and reinforce their behaviors for standing up and being brave. And then also asking if they're okay, because seeing something traumatic like an individual being bullied, just witnessing that can also be harmful as well. Okay, so when you think about bullying in elementary school, those teachers get tired of even hearing the word bullying because everything is bullying. It's a lot of tattling. But think through what happens when students get a little bit older. When they get a little bit older into 4th, 5th, 6th grade, there's a new type of kind of behavior that starts to occur where students do not report bullying. And if you go back to the types of bullying that we talked about, verbal, online, sexual, relational, prejudicial, those are the less obvious types of bullying. So you're not going to see it yourself. So you have to rely on students telling you about it, either the victim or the bystander. But what happens when they get a little bit older is that students fall into this very common snitch culture. There may be a new term for it, and I don't know what it is, but generally snitch, usually everybody understands that tattle, but a little bit older version of a tattletale. So snitch culture really keeps certain students empowered. And then students who are victims and bystanders are less likely to report the bullying the older they get, because what happens is they think they will be the next victim if they report. And then if they are the victim, they think the bullying is going to get worse for them. Let's say they report it to the teacher, then the teacher pulls the bully into a meeting, they get in trouble. Now the bully might double down and harm them even more. So while the bullying gets less obvious, because we're doing less physical bullying with older students, it's more sneaky and quiet, they're also telling us less that that's what's happening. So the two things are not going well together to be able to respond to bullying happening in your school. And this is why we kind of have to shift how we think about responses and looking for bullying. So boys peak in bullying earlier than girls. And cyberbullying, all of our normal trends about bullying kind of go out the door, because cyberbullying can happen very young into older students. And so those trends that we kind of rely on to be able to respond in different ways when they get older, just note that they don't really hold with cyberbullying. So what can we do about bullying for tweens and teens? especially when it's happening through gaming and social media. That's a big topic right now, and I don't have the answers for that. There's obviously texting still happening, bullying through texting. Those have screenshots. Then you have social media apps like Snapchat that go away. So somebody might say something and then it completely disappears. And then a new one to me that I've just recently learned about is bullying through gaming systems, where I just thought they were playing video games together and maybe kind of fussing about who wins or who cheated or something. Apparently, they can talk to each other, and then they can also chat with each other. And sometimes bullying is happening there too. So really, it's making its way into all of these places that we don't always see and are able to monitor. All right, so when we talk about snitch culture, what we're talking about is when the student with power convinces the other students, even the victim, that reporting or telling makes them a snitch. So this quiets all reporting. So where reporting might be really high in elementary school, it'll just kind of bottom out in middle school. It places fear of the bully turning on students who report. So nobody wants to report. They'll look the other way. Maybe they don't stand with the bully, but they just don't say anything. And then it creates an underground knowledge of bully behavior that is kept from the adults and leaves students to deal with bullying on their own or parallel process that with other students. And so students they don't have the help of the adults around them to help respond to it. And remember, in the very beginning, we talked about how we need a serious and immediate response to bullying because it can have harmful outcomes. So that means we need adults involved. But what's happening with the snitch culture essentially is they're taking the adults out of the equation altogether because they're either trying to deal with it on their own, they're just hiding it and not talking to anybody about it. So that means that all of us have a job to do. It's really, really interesting when you look at bully reporting data for staff. So when I say staff, I mean anyone in your building. So nutritional staff, custodial staff, front office staff, library, PE, classroom teachers, administration, everybody. So around 70% of school staff have seen bullying, and 41% witness bullying once a week or more. So the adults in the building know that this is happening, and there's a big problem in schools just in general with what gets attention and what gets prioritized. We see educators who are just burnt out and completely stressed. There's a lot of academic pressure with standards and testing to just focus on the content. So what do we do with this thing that we know we have procedures, we have laws in place, we have to have a serious and immediate response, but we have so many other things distracting us and taking our attention away, and the students aren't really reporting it clearly. So all of that put together, an equation really would make it so that students are on their own and that they're experiencing bullying in all these different ways, and nobody's addressing it and helping them to stop it and to teach both the bully and the victim. So what's an option? Is this an option? Keep your head down and do good work and just hope it goes away and focus on your unit or take your attendance or get back to your computer. That's one option. We could kind of look the other way. It's a really complicated and difficult thing to deal with. And if anyone's an administrator in this room, you guys probably know, because it turns into a lot of he said, she said, reporting differences and having to track down what happened and witnesses and kind of corroborate stories. We've even had an experience with our oldest son where an individual wrote a note and left it on his backpack, and they checked the handwriting. They verified that it was his handwriting, and then even checked the cameras in the school to make sure that was him that had come out of his classroom to go to the bathroom, but really left a note. Like, these investigations can take a lot of work, and it might be kind of good to think to yourself, well, I'm just going to keep my head down and I'm just going to do my work. That's not my work. And I hope that when you listen to me and we talk through these things, you'll start to see that it's really all of our work to protect children and to support the bully, because they're not just a bad kid. They don't just need punishment. They need supports as well. So if we're ignoring, we're not supporting the bully victim. We're also not supporting the bully themselves. So there's create a culture against snitch blaming, reinforce reporting for bystanders, elevate those students who demonstrate leadership, recognize their leadership and bravery for reporting, so that, because they're going to have to take a risk, the risk of reporting, but being a good person and doing what I know is right, or the other risk that might happen here is they report and now the bully comes after them. And that's hard for youth. And their brains are changing. They've got all sorts of stuff going. So to make the brave decision to report and be a leader is a really huge thing. And so the school culture can definitely make a big deal out of those that do the right thing. And that should diminish a little bit of that snitch blaming. And then that word snitch kind of becomes a bad word. You do have to teach procedures for your students and for your staff for responding and reporting. So when you're teaching your staff that they are part of this team that is looking for bullying and responding to bullying, you'll also have to teach them, if you interrupt an incident that's occurring that is bullying, how do they respond? If they see one or hear one, how do they report that? And you need really clear procedures for your staff and your students on how to do that, or else nobody will do it. I asked my daughter, she had an incident on the bus, and I said, well, how do you report that? And she said, I don't know. So it was something she wanted to tell somebody that it occurred because it occurred to a peer. But then when I asked her, how do you do that? And obviously I helped her figure that out, but she did not know. So when we teach our school-wide expectations, part of the routines and procedures we can be teaching and reminding students all year long and talking about the importance of is bullying prevention as well. And then if you're an administrator or counselor in the building, you know it's very difficult to do this, especially when an incident clearly occurred between two people. There were no other witnesses, but when possible, keep responses confidential, keep reporting confidential, try to keep the person who reported confidential. And the fifth part is what we'll spend the rest of today talking about, which is instead of head in the sand, keep your head up and pay attention. And so that's all we're going to ask our school staff to do. We're going to remind them that as students get a little bit older, they're not coming to us to report anymore. There's this very scary thing around snitch culture where they're afraid to report and their bullying behaviors are becoming more sneaky and less obvious. So we all have to get on board and keep our head up and pay attention and look in our environment and be thinking about what could be bullying. Anita, I see a question in the comments. I'll get to that at the end. I just saw it really quickly in the Q&A. Okay, so who can be involved in bullying prevention? Does it take someone with a master's degree in social work? Does it take a full-time employee? All the answers are no. It could be anybody in your building. So like literally anyone, everyone, grandparent volunteers, educators, classroom instructors, bus drivers, school resource officers, nurses, nutritional staff, anyone in the building can be involved with this kind of see something, say something campaign that you can start in your school. So it's important for them to be empowered to do that. I think sometimes staff in school buildings think that you want them to just focus on their bucket, their job that they're supposed to be doing. And so they need to be empowered and invited in and be empowered to be part of this really important campaign and team that is looking for and responding to bullying. So you might have some that say, but that's not my job. I get paid to X, Y, and Z. So this is where you would come behind them again, kind of as the leader or as the social worker, and empower them and explain why it's so important to be on this team with you. And one thing you can remind them is that student well-being is our collective job. So everyone really at the end of the day is employed or going to volunteer in a school, in a district. because they want to improve and maintain student well-being. And so this is part of that. And as adults who work in schools, it's part of our job to keep kids safe. And bullying definitely harms children. So it's also part of our job then to be on the lookout and to be part of this campaign and this team that is looking for and responding to bullying. We had a discussion about this recently around the use of different people's visions of bullying and different people's visions of their job. So even if our normal job is looking out for criminal behavior like an SRO, building relationships, which is you have to know the students, see their patterns, know who they are to see what's happening. But building relationships will help more with identifying and responding to bullying and lots of other issues in the school as well. But physical bullying is the only kind of bullying you will find when you are looking for misbehaving outwardly. So obviously pushing, hitting, kicking. If you're looking for office discipline referral type of data or behaviors that go to the SRO, you're looking for that verbal or that physical bullying. But it's also important to build relationships with students because there's all sorts of other types of bullying that can also be going on. So getting to know your students, making sure that they know that you're there to create a safe place for everyone and that you're a part of this team is really important too. So let's look at some examples of everyone's head up, looking around, understanding their students and who they serve, and really having an attention for and looking for bullying behaviors. So the first one's kind of the easiest one. I'm going to kind of guide you into these examples. The first one is if you are a classroom teacher. So 5th grade, maybe you're moving classes half of the day, but the 5th grade teacher noticed a scuffle with one student walking away with his head down at recess. So that might be common. A little scuffle might be common, but then when you see maybe there's a group of boys that are laughing, and then you see one individual walking with his head down, and they're kind of far away. So that would be a time to probe and to get up and walk over and say, hey, what's going on? And ask them, because again, as students are getting older, they're not going to come and tell you every single time something like that happens. So you can ask, who said what, who did what, why are you walking with your head down? Are you feeling okay? Do you want to talk about it? That sort of thing. The next one, I know our bus drivers' main job is safety and safety on the road. So they're mostly looking forward, hopefully. Obviously, a lot of buses have video cameras on them. But here's another example. So the Purple Route bus driver noticed one student continually climbed under seats, snuck into an unassigned seat, and trash was left in one area of the bus. So on the surface, that might just look like misbehavior. It might just look like a student who doesn't follow directions. But maybe looking into it further, when looking at the bus video or asking the other students what was going on, you might actually notice, this happened to our oldest son, that there was a student climbing up underneath the seats and he would tie his shoelaces together, or he would steal stuff out of his bag that was sitting on the ground. So it could be just misbehavior, not sitting in your seat, but it could also be involved with a pattern of behavior that is meant to demean another student, which would be bullying. So looking into that would be really helpful. Okay, so for the school resource officer, the first example is the SRO noticed a 7th grade student hiding in the assembly gym hallway between 3rd and 4th periods 3 days in a row. So I think if you put yourself in an SRO's shoes, they're looking for everybody's where they're supposed to be, right? And their first reaction might be, get back to class. Where are you supposed to be? I'm taking you to the office. But in kind of looking at it a little bit differently and looking through kind of this lens of bullying prevention and noticing, 3 days in a row, the same time of day, this child must be trying to avoid something. Something is not safe or does not feel okay for them during this time. Let's see what's going on and let's ask different questions. So instead of responding with punishment, we can respond and be curious and try to get to understand what's going on. Maybe in that hallway, while the hallways are busy, there's some verbal bullying going on or threatening going on. So for an example for the nutritional staff, let's say we have a cafeteria worker who noticed a student following closely, whispering to another student, and then taking food off of their tray of a smaller or younger student every day. So let's say it's a 4th grade student following behind a 1st grade student. And they could just look past that and bring up the food and have a good day. Or you can empower them to say, that doesn't seem quite right. We've got a power imbalance. This is happening daily, so it's repeated. And it looks like they're trying to take over they're stealing their food, they're taking their food, threatening them maybe. And that's definitely something to look into further and empower your nutritional staff to be part of your team in that way. What about custodial staff? So Mrs. Watson, custodial staff, was cleaning the 6th grade hall and found a note that said, "You are gay. Everyone hates you." Okay, Mrs. Watson, without any training, without any awareness, without any procedure, might just wad that up and throw it away. But after training and after being empowered to be part of this all hands on deck, see something, say something campaign, Mrs. Watson might save that note and turn it in the morning to the principal, and so that they could look into that a little bit further. Okay, and the school nurses they know a lot of things that you all don't know in the school buildings. They hear a lot when the students come in and have a lot of information. It can be great assets and team members in this sort of initiative. So Nurse Peterson notices that Samantha has been coming to visit the nurse's office multiple times a week. Each time she complains of somatic complaints, headache, stomach ache, but never has a fever or other symptoms. She seems to just require some time away from class. So the nurse, has noticed that a lot of times when there's somatic complaints, that's what we call things that we're complaining of, physical symptoms, but they're actually coming from an emotional need or an emotional kind of issue that's going on. So because there's no fever and it's happening over and over, maybe the student is very, very anxious, kind of panicky at a certain time of day, and it's that certain class that they've noticed it's the same time. And maybe that's something that he can look into as the nurse a little bit more, what's going on in that class, maybe even ask Samantha, "Are you sure, you don't seem sick, you don't have a fever, or is there anything else going on that you'd like to talk about?" Those sorts of things. Otherwise, he might just, as the nurse, think, "I'm just going to write this down in my log, no fever, sat over here on my bed for 20 minutes, went back to class." That's one way to respond to it if you haven't been empowered to be kind of part of this team. The PE teacher, so PE teachers see a million kids every day. I don't know how they do their job, but they can also be on the lookout. So all 7th and 8th graders dress out for PE at Miss Stamper's school. She has noticed, though, that Joseph, who always has a clean uniform, refuses to go to the locker room and says daily that he didn't bring his uniform. So you could just write up Joseph, give him an F for the day or a discipline log or whatever you call it, or you could look into that a little bit further. There might be something going on in that locker room. Maybe sexual bullying is going on in the locker room where Joseph doesn't feel comfortable getting undressed. So he's just saying that he doesn't have a clean uniform to wear when you've noticed all year it's been clean. So again, you could respond very punitively, reactively, or you can get curious and say, I know about this type of bullying, and maybe that's what's going on here. Another one for school safety officer, the school safety officer who stands at the entry every day noticed that Kareem is the last student off the bus, seemingly worried about going to school. So you could say, come on, you're going to be late to school. You could track him as a tardy, or you could say, hey, what's going on? How come you always hang out on the school bus? Why are you the last one? You don't ever seem excited to get to school. Let's go to my office and talk about what's going on, right? So in each of these scenarios that I show you, there's kind of 2 different responses, and you're not going to get the response of awareness and procedures and reporting unless you train all staff that you're looking out for that and empower them to be on your team. So the biggest message for everyone is to notice that they are empowered to notice these things and to speak up and to report. And then you have to teach your reporting procedures as well. So what does that require? Your building needs to have a culture of care. So I gave you several examples where we could respond punitively, reactively, negatively, and we're still not even getting to the root cause. So the student in the hallway, the student on the bus, the student in the PE that didn't dress out, there was actually a larger need going on. And if all we do is send them to the office, we're still not getting to that need. So this culture that we're going to try to build is no one with their heads buried in the sand and not one that is punitive and threatening to students. So remember to look out for the two things: power imbalances repeated, and especially around protected classes of individual students, and looking for aggression, threats, intimidation, harassment across all of those different categories of bullying that we talked about. Treat those seriously by using restorative, reparative conversations and appropriate consequences, which are instructional and therapeutic, not just punitive. So when bullying does occur, you'll have your code of conduct. You may have a harassment incident code in there, a verbal threat incident code. So you have to apply your code of conduct, but what you need to do is pair that with something restorative to fix the underlying issue, or support for that student who displayed bullying behaviors, and around social problem solving, something like that. So there are those appropriate consequences, but we also want to pair anything we're doing, repairing the relationship with a student for sure, repairing the wellness of the victim of the bullying, and then also supporting the bully as well. So it can be a tendency to just focus on the victim and the bystander. It is really important to support the bully and provide the supports that they need. Otherwise, as we know with everything around social emotional behavioral needs, it'll just keep coming back. It's not likely to go away on its own. Especially as students get older, it'll just change form. It'll kind of morph from physical bullying to verbal bullying to relational bullying and that sort of thing over time. So unless we address that individual student who is the bully and provide them with supports that they need, that's just going to keep coming back. So you're telling your staff, you're really just looking for this shift. So you're getting away from snitch culture and relying only on students reporting, and you're going to ask adults to initiate conversation, to notice, to look for. So I noticed this happen. Can you tell me more about what I saw or heard yesterday? Or, hey, I just wanted to follow up with you and ask you more questions about your headaches and what's going on in the time of day, something like that. So you're kind of, if you can't get students to report in your school because of the strong snitch culture and you've tried to address that, you've got this all hands on deck with all the adults, and you're really shifting to them initiating and initiating that conversation and noticing all around school, even on the bus. So I am right on time. It is 1:56. And we have plenty of time. Oh, I have my email address here if anybody wants to email me. And then I thought I could come off of screen share. We can put that in the chat as well and open it up for questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. And we do have a question that was put in the Q&A box. Is there any research on the impact of using the word bully with students? I'm thinking about students I work with who have internalized a lot of negative messages about themselves from abusive caregivers. And I wonder about the impact on their mental health when adults label them as a bully when their behavior is coming from a complex place.
That is a great point and a great question. And I probably said bully several times. So this is a great time to point out it's really bullying behavior. It's really an individual demonstrating bullying behavior, right? It's not the whole child's identity that they are a bully. It's easiest to talk about it like bully and victim. But truly, when you're talking to children and families even, and your older children, youth, it's important to know that you can label their behavior as this fits the definition of bullying, but we would never say their whole identity is a bully. And I think that's where you make a great point about kind of labeling the individual as a bully rather than labeling the behavior as bullying behavior, if that helps. I hope that answers the question.
And then a question just came in. What do you do when the teacher is a bully?
Which Bobby, I'm so sorry that you would have to ask that question, but I actually do think in some cases, so the teacher, if you think about it, the teacher role already has that power imbalance. So that criteria is already checked off. So we do have to be really, really careful as educators to not take advantage of that power imbalance and to watch our words and to not use our words to be demeaning. So the answer to what you do is you would follow the same procedures and report teachers as having demonstrated bullying behaviors, and you can use that definition. There's a power imbalance. That could also be a coach and a player. There's a power imbalance there. The player wants playing time, the coach is in charge of playing time. Maybe they're harassing them, demeaning them, calling them names, those sorts of things, getting the rest of the kids on the team to haze them. So this can happen between adults and children and youth as well. We just want to make sure we report it, use really careful language around it, that you saw that there was a power imbalance, that this has happened repeatedly, and that it fits into one of those criteria, and definitely do the reporting around that.
I love your presentation, Sarah, because I know for those of us who do PD and training, our number one goal is my number one goal is to fill up folks' tool bags. And you gave so much information to fill up the tool bag of our educators. So thankful for that. Monica says, I struggle with trying to get buy-in from staff for our SPED students. How do you change that?
Well, let me see if I understand Monica's question first. So trying to get buy-in from staff for our students with disabilities. Maybe we're talking about paraprofessionals, our staff that are working with students with disabilities. So one thing is, I think individuals, even when I was a paraprofessional, I never really understood what my job was. I kind of felt like I needed to stay in my little lane with my small group of kids that I worked with. So it really, to get them on board, I think the first thing would be to empower them, that they're a really important part of the team, that the children that they serve and the rest of the children at the school really need them, and they're part of the team. There's no hierarchy here where anybody's better than anybody else, and really empower them to be part of the team, and then give them the why. So anytime you're talking about buy-in, you have to tell people the why and be really explicit about that. It's kind of like a sales technique. I guess if I was going around selling dictionaries or something, I would have to tell you why you should buy all these dictionaries, but definitely getting them on board, empowering them, and then definitely giving them the why focusing on this is important. Okay. Did you have another one?
Yeah. Laura says, are there recommended curriculums for middle school for prevention?
Yes. So I think Dr. Ron Denise presented you guys with, right? Expect Respect is free, and it was developed from the folks out of Oregon. And so start there, because that one is free, and it teaches all the students in middle school the procedure for how to respond to bullying. There's a stop, there's a report procedure. They try to deal with it on their own. If anybody's heard of the debug system, it's kind of similar. And then they know how to report. So Jessica, thank you. Jessica put that in the chat, where it's the Expect Respect curriculum, and that one's free and it's aligned with PBIS. So I would definitely start there.
We love that price tag.
Yeah.
It's good. Free and evidence-based. How could you not do that?
Right.
Jessica, what you mentioned about making sure we are mindful of protected groups. What about children who are bullied based on the basis of their race?
Yes, so that actually goes into so you would report it in the same way, and then that to the school system should be escalated in a different way, and even maybe go to legal, because any race-based, sexual orientation, protected class-based bullying or harassment is in the community illegal behavior, right? So it should be escalated, but you start out the same way by reporting it. And then you just make sure to add all of those details, that it was a protected class, and these are the statements that were specifically made during the verbal bullying or whatever. So that it gets reported the same way, and then hopefully it gets processed in an even more serious way.
Sarah, I work for the University of Washington, but I live in Texas. And one thing about our state is that we have a state law that says if there's a mention of bullying, an administrator must go investigate it. I'm curious, Kelly, we're going to get to your question. I'm curious, how many of you live in states that has a law that targets bullying? Now, what's interesting, Sarah, is that I love the way you broke out there's different types of bullying. And so certainly for administrators in the state of Texas, you want to be mindful of different kinds of bullying as the law requires you to go investigate. So you have to be knowledgeable about different forms of bullying. But guys, if you could, okay, I see someone said yes, in Indiana, there's a law. Let's see. Cameo says, you rock, Sarah. Have to hop off for another meeting. Can't wait to check out your book.
Nice.
Yes. Laura says Illinois has a school code. Sarah, do you know about across the nation, how many states have laws on the books that require that?
I don't know how many have that. I could get you to the resource that how many states have laws around requiring training. I think I know that the training around bullying prevention, that might be suicide prevention that I'm thinking of, but I don't, and these laws change. We just had new laws changed here in our legislative session this year. So they change, but that would be really interesting to look at and to see if in those states, because they have to report it and they have to respond to it, that it's taken more seriously. And if the students, like in school climate ratings, they report feeling safer and more supported.
Yeah. And so Bobby said yes in Delaware, New Jersey. So a few states are coming through and saying, yeah, there's legislation. Kelly says, do you have suggestions for elementary student curriculum? We're working with first and second graders to establish kindness and see something, say something.
Yes. So Expect Respect also has an elementary version of that. There's a secondary, middle school, and then there's an elementary version as well. And we did a really interesting study with Expect Respect and found something. So I just wasn't even thinking about it, but we looked at elementary, middle, and high as 3 different cohorts. And what we found was teaching that curriculum made the most impact at upper elementary school. They seemed to be old enough at that age to really understand the content and why it's important. And then they also were old enough to employ those procedures that we were teaching them and use them. And they were before the real heavy snitch culture came in, where everything gets silenced. And then another interesting time point when we used that curriculum was actually in high school. That I think, the adolescence or the teenage years are so weird and awkward. Everyone was just kind of struggling with it in middle school. It didn't make things much better in middle school, but then in high school, it really empowered them to have that language and those procedures again.
Wonderful. She said, thank you for that. Dr. Jessica Swain Bradway has put in the chat a free resource for secondary. StandForCourage.org. It's based off Expect Respect, and Dr. Scott Ross helped to get the nonprofit started.
Yeah, there's a lot of, I'll just add really quickly, there's a lot of things that you could do that are incongruent with bullying that you can also really focus on, like kindness initiatives, your PBIS expectations. So just remember that too. It's a great, Stand for Courage would be we're focusing on this. We're elevating this type of behavior. We're telling you, we're centering that that's really important. And then the message to students is these types of behaviors, bullying behaviors, threatening behaviors, are the unwanted behaviors. So anything that you guys have around courage and kindness and your PBIS school-wide expectations all point students in the direction you want them going in.
Well, it's funny you said kindness, because I just thought about it. Every morning, if I, whether I drop my son off or my husband drops our youngest son off, who's a 6th grader, I always tell him, choose kindness. Choose kindness. So yes, wonderful. Any other questions? We have a little bit more time. And you know what, Dr. McDaniel, because of who you are and our wonderful participants, we are going to, you and I decided we're going to make sure that they can get what is it called? I don't want to mess it up.
Expect Respect.
Yeah, for free. We're giving
them. You get Expect Respect, and you get Expect Respect. Everyone gets Expect Respect.
Exactly.
Our gift to you.
Right. Oh gosh, Jennifer Norton. I just have to say, Jennifer said, "I love this entire opportunity. Clenny to such a charismatic hostess. Sarah,
Yes.
wonderful information being presented through your research, and JSB in the chat, hyping participants up. Yes, it is always hyping. Thank you, Dr. Jessica Swain Bradway. Oh, that's a gosh. What are suggested curriculums to facilitate with both faculty and also students in elementary, middle, and high schools?
Well, this is a great question. I was thinking about this when you were asking about student curriculum, because I don't know. I mean, I could send you my slides, whoever's asking. But when I train, I created my slides. So I don't know if there's a curriculum for like a trainer of trainers or something like that for adults. I don't know if there's one that exists, but I'd be happy to share what I have with you that goes through what we just talked about and overviewed. So the definition of bullying, types of bullying, and even different types of roles too. So I don't know if that exists somewhere else. Maybe somebody else does that's already somewhere.
Two things. Bobby says, FYI, no peer mediation between the bully and the target. It's not helpful, can actually be harmful to the target.
Yeah, peer mediation is a great strategy for when someone hasn't been harassed or threatened or harmed in that way. It's more like things like, I don't like the way you talk to me, or I don't want to be your friend anymore. Those situations are great for peer mediation. I will encourage you, though, to try to focus on any positive way of restoring that relationship, or at least restoring like an apology, an understanding, an agreement, or something like that, but not only mediated by peers. Definitely you would need some adult mediation.
I'm glad you said restorative, because Laura said, in a strong union district, how do you engage the old school staff members in using restorative to reduce bullying?
Well, our educators who have been in the field for a while had Jessica said whiskey and chocolate. Bribery, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one, other than for me, the only thing I've been successful with is really trying to help empower them to have a flexible mindset, to be open, and then to remind them of the why, and that really our values are all aligned, because our baseline value is that we care about kids. And so if we all care about kids, can we at least have an open mind to trying this? Or if you don't want to facilitate the restorative, would you at least be open to sending your students here so that I can facilitate the restorative? So meeting them somewhere, trying to understand their pushback and listen to that also helps. Educators who have been teaching for a long time have a lot of wisdom and have a lot to share with us. So let them tell you why it won't work, or what the components of it that they don't think will work. And then try to meet in the middle for sure. Use all the conflict resolution skills you have under your belt. Yeah.
All right. Disclaimer, it was prepared for the Northwest MHTTC under a cooperative agreement from SAMHSA. If you want to contact us, you can use all these forms of communication, the World Wide Web, our email for MHTTC, Facebook, our X, and the same thing for the Smart Center, our email, X, Facebook, LinkedIn. We have a new LinkedIn account for the UW Smart Center. And I can't say it. Hey guys, you know how at every end of the year, how everybody posts on their Instagram? And with this concludes the 2024 speaker series. We are so thankful that you guys took time out of your day, because there's a lot for you guys to do. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, Sarah McDaniel. Thank you for all the participants. Thank you to my colleagues who I could not do this without them. We thank you, and we are always here to help support you. Have a wonderful rest of your week. We're almost to the weekend. Thank you. Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.